Serial killer.
But a man could have gotten killed in a motel.
He got killed.
Didn't make any difference to you?
That's right.
Serial killers wait, usually 3-6 months, to commit a crime. However, in 1986, a South Korean guy named Lee Chun-jae raped 7 women and killed 4. It took the authorities 33 years to solve the case. Numerous investigations were conducted, and significant effort was dedicated to this case. The Hwasong serial murders are infamous within South Korea for being the first truly identifiable string of murders with a similar modus operandi. The police officers involved spent 2 million man on the case. The total number of suspects also grew, eventually reaching a total count of 21,280 individuals, in addition 40,116 individuals had their fingerprints taken, and 570 DNA and 180 hair samples. Several movies were produced based on this case, such as Memories of Murder, Confession of Murder, Gap, Dong, and Signal. The cases will make you goosebumps. The murderer in this video killed his victims savagely and in horrible different ways that the human brain can't imagine. So, let us find out how he got caught and how he stayed away from justice for 33 years committing crimes. The serial murders occurred in Hwasong-si, a tranquil and peaceful city in South Korea, renowned for its farmland and stunning natural surroundings. Up until 1986, Hwasong-si had not witnessed any crimes. However, this changed when Lee Chun-jae disturbed the public with his dreadful crimes. Lee Chun-jae was born in Hwasong, Gyeonggi Province on 31 January 1963. According to his mother, Lee had a good education and worked well with others. He had a younger brother who drowned in his childhood, an incident which purportedly traumatized him. In early age, Lee's behaviors took another turn. He spent a significant amount of time torturing small animals as an outlet for his anger. His parents sought help for his issues. However, they abused him when he did not show improvement. After graduating from high school in February 1983, Lee joined the Republic of Korea Army and served as a tank driver. He was discharged in January 1986. In the year 1963, Lee committed a total of 11 crimes throughout the year. Within those months, he raped 7 unnamed women of different ages. However, he did not take someone's life until the 14th of September, 1986. September 14, 1986, the incident in which Lee Won-im, age 72, was murdered in the grassland around 9 p.m. or 6 a.m. on September 15. At the time, the victim stayed overnight at her daughter's house and disappeared at 6 a.m. on September 15, after leaving the house early in the morning to sell the vegetables she had grown. On September 19, about 4 days after she went missing, a rancher found the victim dead in a pasture field around 2 p.m. The place where Won was found was about 10 minutes away from her daughter's house, and her body was with her lower garments removed and her legs crossed in the shape of an X. The investigation found that there was no sexual assault, and the cause of death was strangulation. The police estimated that the victim was walking to the main road where the bus was running when she was noticed by the criminal and taken to a pasture field where she was killed. The police failed to find any clues such as fingerprints, belongings, footprints, or body hair, and were unable to even catch the suspect. A month later, on October 20, the 26-year-old Hyun Suk Park was murdered after being sexually assaulted in a farm waterway. That morning, the victim took a bus to Songsan-ri, where her adoptive mother lived. Hyun Suk Park returned home around 8:50 p.m. Her adoptive mother escorted the victim to the entrance of the village, and the victim disappeared while walking along the causeway toward the bus stop about 1 km away. Approximately 3 days later, on October 23rd, around 2 p.m., the owner of the rice field found the victim dead inside the concrete waterway of the agricultural waterway and reported it. The victim was naked when found and had several stab wounds on her chest and back. A stocking was wrapped around her neck. Clothes were discarded on the embankment of a farm waterway.
Police plans to obtain additional evidence. 당시 수사 기록을 검토하고 사건 분석을 통해서 확인할 수 있는 부분이 있는지 저희들이 그걸 찾아서
And traces of rape and semen were found and examined, but blood type analysis failed. Instead, the police analyzed milk cartons, cigarette butts, and hair that were believed to belong to the criminal. The police once again failed to identify the prime suspect, and the entire investigation ended in failure. Lee did not stop there. He finished his year taking 2 lives. On December 12, the 25-year-old Kwon Jong-bu, after finishing work at the factory, the victim took a bus around 6 p.m. and went to the bus stop to meet her husband. After having dinner, the couple got on a bus around 10:30 to go home first, and shortly after at 11, they got off and walked toward the house before disappearing. The body in a state of decomposition was discovered by the rice paddy owner, Mr. Kim, while repairing the rice field ridge. The place where she was found was only about 50 meters away from her house. Her bottoms were removed, her mouth was gagged with stockings and a girdle, and her face was covered in bloody underwear. Police believed that the killer dragged the victim to the bottom of a rice field, stripped her of her clothes, gagged her, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her with a stocking before hiding the body under a bag of sand at the bottom of an embankment. On December 14, around 11 p.m., Lee committed another horrible crime. He sexually assaulted the 22-year-old guy, Suk Lee, and murdered her right after. It happened just 2 days after the third incident. The victim had a meeting that day at a coffee shop in downtown Suwon in the afternoon after work that day. The meeting went well and ended after 10 p.m. At around 11 p.m., the victim got off at the final stop of the house and went to the house 1 kilometer away. She was last seen by her neighbor, a 70-year-old lady, at around 11:05 p.m. The victim's family reported her missing to the police. The police searched the entire area and found the victim's body covered in perilla grass on the bank stream at about 12:30 p.m. on December 21st. About a week later, it was confirmed that the victim's hands were tied behind her back with a blouse. A girdle was placed over her head, and the blouse had been removed and put back on. As a result of the investigation, it was confirmed that the victim had been strangled with a stocking, had traces of sexual assault on her lower body, and had been assaulted with an umbrella. However, it rained on the day of the incident, and a week after her death, the blood type reading failed. Although type B blood type was detected, it was judged not to be an accurate result because the victim's blood type was also type B. All victims, their mouths were stocked and assaulted badly. It is really heartbreaking. Lee's obsession to murdering did not stop as he kept harvesting souls and noted that he was unemployed and only 23 years old by that time. It was only less than a month since committing the last crime. Lee harvested another young soul, but this time the victim was only 18 years old. On January 10, 1987, around 8:50 p.m., Hong Jin Young was found murdered after being sexually assaulted in a rice field. On that day, Hong Jin went to submit her resume to the company and met a friend near the north gate of Suwon City. She boarded a bus around 8:30 and got off in 50 minutes. Afterwards, the victim, who was returning home, was attacked by the criminal, and the next morning, the owner of the rice field, who was moving rice straw, discovered the body in the rice straw. The victim's hands were tied with underwear, and unlike other incidents, she was fully clothed. The investigation revealed that the victim had been strangled with a scarf and showed signs of sexual assault. Although semen was detected, it was difficult to determine the blood type because it was mixed with blood. Instead, the blood type found from pieces of cloth and pubic hair all came out as type B, and you might be wondering why the police did not apprehend him based on his semen and DNA. At that time, South Korea lacked the latest technology to do so. On May 2, 1987, around 11 p.m., the 29-year-old Yeonju Park was murdered after being sexually assaulted, this time on a mountain. The victim went out to pick up her husband's umbrella on a night of heavy rain. The victim, who left home at 9 p.m., arrived at the bus stop around 9:30 and waited for her husband until 10 p.m. At this time, her husband returned home by bus at 10:30 p.m. because of overtime work. He got off at the bus stop around 11 o'clock, but his wife was neither at the stop nor at home. The husband, worried about his wife, reported her missing 2 days later, and during the search, the police found the victim's sandals on the rice field right below the bus stop where she was last seen. The victim's body was discovered on May 9, about a week after she went missing, by children who were returning home from class after crossing the mountain. The place where she was discovered was a pile of wood next to a grave 200 meters away from the victim's house. The body had its upper body stripped, hands tied behind its back, and a blouse and underwear wrapped around its neck. The investigation revealed signs of sexual assault, and the cause of death was strangulation. A footprint was found at the scene, and the semen found on the sweatshirt was examined and found to be type A. However, because the victim's husband was type A, the police were said to be unsure of the results. Lee stopped his awful actions for over a year, until September 7, 1988, Anji's son was found in a farm waterway, sexually assaulted. The 54-year-old victim went missing after helping out at a snack bar in downtown Suwon, run by her eldest son that day, getting on a city bus heading home at 8:40 p.m. The husband, who became anxious when his wife did not return until late at night, contacted her relatives as soon as daybreak and searched for the victim. At around 9:30 a.m., on September 8, the day after the disappearance, the husband's cousin found the victim's body covered in blood. The victim's hands were tied with her blouse, her mouth was gagged with socks and a handkerchief, and her rat-colored skirt was believed to have been removed and put back on. The investigation revealed that there were signs of sexual assault and that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to compression of the neck with a blouse string. What is even more shocking is that 7 pieces of peach, cut into crescent shapes, were found inside the victim's vagina, and the victim's lower body was assaulted with an umbrella again. After this incident, it was confirmed that Lee Chun-jae left footprints in the rice field while leaving the scene, and that the footprints continued to the road that was the village bus route. There, the police also confirmed that he was on a bus heading towards Suwon. By conducting a thorough investigation of all buses passing along the bus stop route at the time, we were able to find the bus driver who was operating at that time, secure witnesses, and distribute a montage. In the process, a statement was obtained that the suspect's little finger had balsam water, but in fact it was confirmed that Lee Chun-jae did not dye his fingernails with balsam, but that the victim's blood was on Lee Chun-jae's little finger during a perverted act. Another serial murder occurred, and public opinion was outraged by the even more brutal methods, and the head of the Weising police station at the time was replaced. The suspect sketch was drawn based on the memory of a bus driver, surnamed Kang, and bus conductor, who saw a man get on the bus shortly after the 7th murder on September 7, 1988. The characteristics of the suspect, which were described by the bus driver, were similar to the descriptions given by survivors who were sexually assaulted. According to the victims, the culprit at the time of the incident was a thin-framed man in his mid-20s with a height of 165 to 170 centimeters, short-cut sporty-type hair, no double eyelids, and a sharp nose. A survivor of the serial murders, the 36-year-old Lee Jeum-ran was attacked by Lee sometime in late 1986, and she described him as skinny with a low voice. On July 27, 1989, Yeon Sung-yo, a 22-year-old man, was arrested for the murder of the 8th victim. Yeon admitted guilt during questioning, and according to a 1989 report written by an expert at the National Forensic Service, the forensic tests of pubic hair samples found at the scene suggested similarities with his, returning a 40% match with Yeon's. This case was determined to be a copycat crime, and Yeon was sentenced to life in prison. Lee was arrested. However, it was not for killing, but for robbery. Lee broke into a house armed with weapons and wearing gloves. Upon being discovered by the landlord, he was arrested in February 1990. He was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison for robbery and violence. Lee filed an appeal right after the first trial, claiming that he had been attacked by an unknown man and he entered the house while being chased. A second trial changed his duration to 2 years of probation, but unfortunately, he was released in April. This time, the police were in close proximity to catch their serial killer. On November 15, 1990, Lee committed the worst crime around 6:30 p.m. He took the life of a 14-year-old girl named Kim Mi-jong after assaulting her sexually on a mountain. The victim was on cleaning duty for the class on the day of the incident, so she left school later than other students. At around 5 p.m., Lee went missing while leaving after breaking up with his wife. The victim did not return home until 9 p.m. The family became extremely anxious when the victim did not return and even asked for help from relatives. They stayed up all night, searching the surrounding area to find the victim. But in the end, the victim was found dead at around 9 a.m. the next day. The first person to discover it was the victim's uncle, and the hill where the victim was found was a place where police were always stationed at night. The victim was covered in school uniform. Her hands and feet were tied with stockings, and she was gagged with underwear. The autopsy results were shocking, showing that he sexually assaulted the victim, slashed her chest about 20 times with a stationary knife that was in the victim's pencil case, and then strangled her with stockings and a blouse. Additionally, the victim's belongings such as spoons, forks, and ballpoint pens were found inside her private spot. In addition, undigested japchae was found in the victim's stomach, which means that the victim was killed within 2 hours of eating the japchae. The problem is that the victim brought japchae for lunch that day, but what she ate for lunch should have been digested a long time ago, and there was no time to eat it in the evening because she was leaving school right away. Fingerprints were later found in the victim's lunchbox, which led the police to assume that the criminal had fed or forced the victim to eat japchae before killing her. On April 3, 1991, around 9 p.m., a 69-year-old woman named Kwon Soon Sang was murdered, and as usual, after being sexually assaulted on a hill. At the time, Kwon was returning home at around 6:30 p.m. after going to her eldest daughter's house. She was killed around 8 p.m. while getting off the bus and returning home. The next day, a heavy equipment driver who was climbing a field embankment found the victim and reported it. The victim was found 200 meters away from the house, with her bottoms removed, a black stocking wrapped around her neck, and a sock inserted into her private parts. Unlike other cases, there was no gag or hands tied, and the victim's direct cause of death was asphyxiation, not strangulation, so it was suspected of being a copycat crime. In December 1993, around 2 years after, at that time, Lee was 30. Lee's wife left him. As a result, Lee wanted to take out his stress and anger, and you will not like the way he used. He invited his sister-in-law over and drugged her. He then proceeded to rape her. The girl resisted, crying in fear. The saddest part is, after he was done, he took her life. And to lower any suspicion that he was the killer, he hid her body and went to his father-in-law, offering to help search for her. Both reported she was probably abducted. Her body was found 2 days later in a hardware store's snow-covered garage, wrapped in a blue trap. Her head had a plastic bag and jeans on it. Her hands were tied with torn underwear, and the rest of her was covered with multiple items, such as stocking and bag straps. On January 18, Lee was arrested, raising suspicion that he had killed her when he repeatedly inquired, "How many years do you serve in prison for rape and murder?" He denied any involvement in his sister-in-law's death, and the court dismissed his confession, asserting that he had lied due to alleged police brutality. Nevertheless, he was convicted and sentenced to death in May, and this conviction was upheld. In September 1995, the Supreme Court reviewed the case and reduced his sentence to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. On September 18, 2019, it was announced that Lee had been identified as a suspect in the Hwaseong serial murders. DNA from the underwear of one of his victims matched his, and subsequent evidence linked him to 4 of the 10 killings.
The DNA of the suspect in question, who is currently serving a prison sentence for murder, was collected in 2011.
He initially denied responsibility, but on October 2, authorities revealed that he eventually confessed to murdering 15 victims, including the 10 previously unsolved ones. 3 of the other 5 killings were mentioned by him. In addition, Lee confessed to over 30 rapes and attempted rapes. On November 15, authorities announced that they had determined Lee was responsible for the Hwaseong killings.
The investigators are determined to solve the remaining 6 cases by interrogating people who knew the suspect based on the time and location of the crimes.
On July 2, 2020, it was confirmed that Lee had committed 4 of the 5 unrelated murders and at least 9 rapes. It was also determined that the motive was to relieve his sexual desire. Lee is still in prison until nowadays, age 60 years old, and the 33-year-old cold case was finally closed. Thanks for watching, and these are more interesting cases you could watch.